boyfriend wanted to control my money and was upset that I treated my parents very well. I 29F have been dating my boyfriend 27M for just over a year, but I've recently started questioning our relationship because of a recurring issue. He has a problem with how I choose to spend my money, especially when it comes to buying gifts or helping my parents. For some background, my parents are both teachers. Although they've always had enough to live comfortably, they've chosen a simpler lifestyle. While their peers spent on bigger homes or flashy cars, my parents focused on saving and supporting extended family. Growing up, our life was modest, but we never lacked essentials. My parents made sure to prioritize family values and education over material possessions. One thing they loved was traveling, and before I turned 18, I had visited several countries with them. They always found budget-friendly ways to make these experiences meaningful, like staying at small inns instead of high-end hotels. One memory that sticks with me is my dad admiring a luxury watch, but deciding not to buy it because he thought it was too indulgent. That moment made me want to give him something meaningful when I could afford it. My parents invested so much in me, paying for my college tuition and even helping me get a car. Now that I'm financially stable, I love spoiling them when I can. Recently, I surprised them with a weekend getaway, and my boyfriend was furious. He said I was wasting money and that they shouldn't expect gifts from me. The issue is that while he's usually supportive in other areas, he has this belief that my money shouldn't go toward helping my parents or giving them extravagant gifts. It's making me feel like his outlook on finances is controlling and completely incompatible with mine. This disagreement has me wondering if our values are too different to make this work long term. Has anyone else dealt with a partner who disapproved of how you support your family financially? If so, how did you handle it? My parents retired and moved back to Italy, where their savings and pensions fully cover their expenses, so they don't need any financial help from me. I was fortunate to keep their townhouse, which is completely paid off. My only responsibility is covering property taxes and utilities. It's a spacious 3-bedroom home, and my boyfriend lives with me, along with 2 other housemates. We split the cost of property taxes and utilities, which comes out to around $350 a month each. As a medical resident with a modest salary, that $350 contribution is a big help, especially since I live in a pricey city. Here's the thing. I'm endlessly grateful to my parents. Unlike many of my peers who are drowning in $200,000 or more of student debt, I have only a small amount of loans thanks to their support. I've always wanted to show my appreciation. After finishing medical school and starting to earn a steady income, I saved up and bought my mom a Gucci bag and my dad a rare vintage watch he'd always admired. I also took them out to an upscale restaurant for dinner. When I gave them the gifts, my mom started crying and said the bag was too extravagant, urging me to return it. I insisted she keep it, and during that dinner, we had an emotional conversation where I told them how much their sacrifices meant to me, and they told me how proud they were. When I told my boyfriend about it, his only reaction was, "She cries over everything." Sure, my mom is a little emotional, but it annoyed me that he dismissed such a meaningful moment. What also bothers me is that I sometimes send my parents a little extra money if I have anything left over after covering my essentials, saving, and occasional treats. I encourage them to use it for something fun or indulgent. I understand I may not always be able to do this when I have a family of my own, and my parents have said the same, but for now, it's something I enjoy doing. The issue came up again today, when my boyfriend saw me purchasing plane tickets for my parents to visit me. He argued that I had already bought my own ticket to visit them, so why was I paying for theirs? While my parents can afford their own travel, they typically only budget for 1 trip a year because they're on fixed retirement income. I want to see them more often, so I don't mind covering the cost. He then told me my parents have made me a spoiled brat. That comment stunned me because I view myself as independent and grounded. What really frustrated me was his hypocrisy. I pointed out that he's essentially benefiting from my parents' generosity by living in the home they paid off, paying minimal costs. If he has such an issue with how I treat my family, then maybe he shouldn't live here at all. I told him if he doesn't like it, he should just leave and find a place for $1,800 a month like everyone else. Right now, he's staying in a hotel, but he told me he's coming back tomorrow morning. I honestly don't know what to do after everything that's happened. The argument got so heated there was yelling, and he ended up smashing a vase my grandmother gave me. It was one of the few things I had left of hers. Do I suggest couples therapy? I'm in tears writing this because he's the first serious boyfriend I've had in years, and I don't know how to handle this. What would you do if you were in my shoes? If I were in your position, therapy wouldn't even cross my mind. The first thing I'd do is change the locks. Your boyfriend doesn't seem like the kind of person who values your bond with your family, let alone respects your autonomy. But what's worse is his sense of entitlement. He thinks he has a say in how you spend your money, even though you're not married. That alone is a huge red flag. And when you call him out on his hypocrisy, he responds with violence, destroying something sentimental. Arguments happen, but breaking your belongings? That's crossing a line. I think you need to hand him his things and let him go. Let him stay in that hotel or find his own place. This isn't someone you should try to build a future with. What do you all think? Let me know in the comments. Let's take a look at what the community has to say. Commenter 1. Think of your grandmother. She gave you that vase as a reminder of your bond. Do you really think she'd want you to stay with someone who doesn't value you or the things you cherish? Your parents worked so hard to give you a good life. Don't waste it on someone who doesn't appreciate you. Op's response. Thank you for this. It really hit home, and I'm tearing up again reading it. My grandmother was so important to me, and this comment gave me some clarity. Commenter 2. Calling you spoiled, criticizing your money habits, and breaking your things. That's abusive behavior. You deserve someone who celebrates your kindness and respects what's important to you. Let him go. Op's response. You're absolutely right. I don't know why I'm second-guessing myself. Maybe because I thought dating another doctor would mean we'd understand each other better, but that clearly isn't the case. Commenter 3. You're kind-hearted, and he's dismissing that as weakness. That's a toxic mindset. It's time to protect your peace and let him go. In another comment, Op shared some background. I started dating him because I admired his drive. He came from nothing and worked his way up, while I had a lot of support growing up. I thought our differences would balance each other out, but I realize now it's just made him resentful. My parents weren't perfect, but they gave me everything they could. That vase was one of the last gifts from my grandmother, and now it's gone because of him. She continued, I bought the purse for my mom because I wanted to give her something special. I didn't expect to have to justify that to anyone. An update from Op. After I posted, my best friend came over, and I told her everything. She wasn't shocked. She pointed out red flags about him I hadn't noticed before. For example, he's always been overly critical, whether it's at work or at home. If someone leaves a single dish in the sink, he acts like it's a personal attack. I didn't see it as a big deal before, but now I'm realizing how draining it is. Her best friend suggested they pack up his belongings and leave them at the door, and that's exactly what they did. The consensus from the community is clear. Ob deserves better, and it seems like she's finally taking steps to prioritize her happiness and peace of mind. Stay tuned for the next update, and in the meantime, don't forget to check out more stories in our playlist. My boyfriend had a toxic superiority complex and always made me felt small. It was oddly therapeutic, being a little tipsy and trying to cram all his stuff into a single suitcase. My best friend and I spent more time laughing than actually packing. The next morning, when he came back, I was about 85% sure I wanted to end things, but I still felt like I owed him the chance to explain himself. Everyone makes mistakes, and sometimes, how someone tries to make amends tells you if they're worth keeping around. Before he got there, he texted me a bunch of half-hearted apologies. Most of them boiled down to, I'm sorry you took my criticism the wrong way. He even added, it's good someone's challenging you instead of blindly agreeing with everything you do. Not exactly a heartfelt apology. When he walked in and saw the suitcase, his attitude shifted. Suddenly, he was apologizing and admitting he'd been wrong. But his tone, it was like listening to a child who's only apologizing to avoid getting grounded. Then, when the room got quiet, I finally asked, what about the vase? He blinked at me, confused, and said, what about the vase? I just stared at him. He should have known exactly what I meant. After a long pause, he said, okay, I'm sorry. That was mean. Maybe we can glue the pieces together and make a charm bracelet or something. I couldn't believe how dismissive he sounded. I shot back, if I wanted a bracelet, I would have asked for one. Honestly though, I did like the idea someone on Reddit had mentioned about turning it into a mosaic. But that wasn't the point. I tried to press the real issue. Do you know how frustrating it is when I do something nice for my parents and you ruin the moment with your comments or disapproving looks? You completely take the joy out of it. His response? Yeah, I can see how that's annoying, but I'm just worried about what happens if we get married. You always rely on your family, and your parents always send money to theirs. I don't want that to become a burden for us. That set me off. You don't actually care about that. And even if you did, it's awful to act like helping family is a burden. My parents don't need my help. If anyone's going to be a burden, it's you with your student loans. I knew that was harsh, but I was so fed up. He fired back that I didn't understand what it was like to have loans and that I'd been so lucky in life. I told him I wasn't denying my privilege and was grateful every day, but I didn't understand why that was a problem for him. Then he crossed another line. Do you even think you'd have become a doctor without your parents? Maybe you only got into medical school because of their connections. That stung, but I wasn't going to let him have the last word. I shot back. If I was going to use connections, I would have aimed for your school or my parents' schools. I didn't. I went to a completely average school, and I'm proud of what I've accomplished. He just sneered and said, that's the difference between us. You're fine settling for average, while I always aim for the best. At that point, I realized there was no winning with him. He'd twist any situation to make me feel small, and I was done. I was hungover, exhausted, and his voice felt like nails on a chalkboard. I told him to leave and said our mutual friend would drop off the rest of his things. He asked if this fight was really worth breaking up over, and insisted he couldn't help how he felt. He promised to stop voicing his issues with my parents in the future. I told him it didn't matter whether he said it out loud or not. I'd still see it on his face. The thought of him silently judging me while I spent time with my family was enough to make me realize we couldn't work. I honestly don't understand where his insecurity comes from, or why he resents me so much. On paper, he's clearly the more impressive one. He's overcome so many challenges, graduated top of his class, and been part of countless projects and charities. No one's denying his accomplishments. I've always admired him for those things. I just don't know why he feels the need to constantly prove himself or worse, tear me down in the process. As for me, I'm nothing extraordinary. I got good grades, did what I needed to get into med school, and that's it. I'm perfectly fine being average if it gets me where I want to be. Honestly, I'd have been happy attending the University of American Samoa online if it meant landing a decent residency. So yeah, we broke up. He's texted me a few times since then, but I haven't responded. The last message was a little different. He wrote, you know it's illegal to kick someone out without notice. Now I'm not sure what to do about that, but I'll figure it out. Honestly, good riddance to him. Sure, he's driven and ambitious, but somewhere along the way, that turned into a toxic superiority complex. He acts like he's the standard everyone else should measure up to. If they surpass him, he downplays their achievements. If they fall short, he's quick to criticize. It's exhausting. I'm glad you made this choice, Op. You deserve better. And I hope you enjoy your time with your family this holiday season.